We're live with some great folks. My name is Jim Ward. I'm CEO of BrainSell. I am drinking a lot of coffee to keep up with these two folks, and it's going to move quick, I'm sure. So this is a water cooler series, how to prospect and build pipeline in a new normal. And I want to introduce the folks that are with us today. We have Becc Holland, who, if you look on Google or you do some research on Becc Holland, flip the script, you'll find a lot of content that is free and terrific. Becc is the head of the sales development at Chorus.AI. Prior, she served as a regional vice president for development at G2. And she was a senior manager for inside sales at Gong. She also serves as an officer for the Silicon Valley chapter of AICP. Looking forward, Becky, to tell me about the AICP too, perhaps at some point. And John, he's the CEO of Barrows. I'm sorry, JB Sales. You go by JB Sales.
Yes, now we changed it.
And the author of a sales book. Is it For Kids? I want to be in sales when I grow up.
Yep.
Oh, that's terrific. Okay.
With my daughter. Yeah.
I thought Sarah had it wrong. I'm like, for kids? Okay,
Nope.
I hadn't.
Children's book.
Great. Awesome. He has provided sales training and consulting services to some of the world's fastest growing companies like Salesforce.com, Google, LinkedIn, Dropbox, many others. I know of him from my vendors such as Sage Intact, would be a place that we became very familiar with him. We follow all of his podcasts. His previous experience spans all aspects of sales and every level, from making 400 sales calls a week as an inside sales guy to VP sales at his first startup, which was later sold to Staples. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
And John, thanks for joining us. Just to set sort of the, we'll set the table in a second, but I wanted to ask both of you a question first, and this goes to both of you. You're both, we follow you both actively on LinkedIn, and our folks, we have them follow you, by the way, to help us with sales prospecting. We attended the Flip the Script tour, Becc, so we know about that, and we're regular listeners of your podcast. John, of course, like I said, who is the one person that you each follow outside of each other, perhaps, that you think somebody folks should be following today in the sales development space? John?
Yeah, in the sales development space or in general?
Yeah, well, maybe in general, just however you feel like it.
Yeah, it's funny. My mentor, Jeff Hoffman. So Jeff is somebody who started Basho, the sales training company that I joined a while back, and then went off for a while, and then came back. And after Basho kind of screwed up and everything, and I took it over, I now resell from him. But it's funny. I've always seen him as a mentor, but I sat on one of his webinars recently and realized how much I have to learn. He's the art. Like when we talk about sales, I talk a lot about it being an art and a science, right?
Yep.
I'm more of the scientist in sales. I'm not the natural born sales professional. I'm actually more of an introvert than I am an extrovert. It doesn't come naturally for me. He is one of those ones that it just comes naturally to. And so I sat on his webinar, and usually I sit on webinars and I kind of half pay attention or whatever. Within 5 minutes, I was like, oh my God, I just kind of reset. Oh, like, yep, I got to pay attention. So actually now I'm developing a new webinar series with him where I'm going to be the pupil asking questions to learn. So we're going to be rolling that out in the next couple of weeks here. But yeah, he's somebody that is more known in kind of senior sales executives and bigger companies. The SDR world right now, and everybody else should be paying attention.
Yeah, thanks, John. Learning is never ending, right? We've got to continuously improve. So, Becc, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know about following. I mean, there's a lot of, industry hitters out there. One that has always I've learned from consistently, I would say, is Dan Smith from Winning by Design. I actually inherited him as a trainer whenever I was at one of my first sales tech companies, Gong. And I have gotten to collaborate with him since, and I have never met someone that I walk into a room and that I'm just like, he's just better than me, like in all regards. He's faster and quicker, more acumen, more technique, on, and that I consistently can learn from, and he makes it really easy just personally to learn from him. I think he just does a phenomenal job in terms of, at least in our discourse. He just has really helped challenge me along the way. So I'd say Dan Smith, and I've actually challenged him back very recently to start putting more content out on LinkedIn, because I'm like, I want people to know you, and
Right.
learn from you because you're so good. And so I'd say Dan Smith, and then outside of the sales community, I love Jack Dorsey and Anna Wintour both. Anna Wintour is the CEO or editor-in-chief of Vogue, and she's someone that I've looked up for a long time. So she's doing, she just did a master class, so I'd recommend that everyone check it out. And then Jack Dorsey, I've always been a fangirl of his, just in the way that he operates in his mind, and seen some of his TED Talks and the way he thinks about like just common communication. If anyone's interested, I would go watch his TED Talk on how he's trying to make Twitter more useful. Like, do people get in fights, or do they stay on the same topic, or some of their metrics that they're running over Twitter? But those are, like in my network, I would say Dan Smith is someone I learned from, but Anna Wintour and Jack Dorsey, and then Elon Musk are probably three of my biggest influences.
That's great. Yeah. Hey, thanks. I think that helps others to expand their knowledge by listening to others as well. So that's great. So I'm going to set the plate or the table here. Building a pipeline in the new normal. I'm not sure normal is the right word here, but it is a new normal. And I'm going to tell you what we're experiencing, and then we can get on and talk about what I think the rest of the market perhaps is experiencing, which is, we did all right in the first quarter, right? But we burned through pipeline. And it isn't so much the first quarter, which is what worries me about the stock market, because it's the next quarters ahead. We've seen still a healthy, surprisingly, stock market. So the next 2 quarters where the rubber hits the road, right? And I think it's going to get thinner. What's the fix? And I'm happy for you guys to rabbit hole here wherever you want. Go wild, be the sales experts gone wild. We'll do that video later. Yeah, or whatever. I don't know. I'm just being edgy. So, John, a question for you. You talk a lot about the need to sell and prospect even smarter right now. What do you mean by that?
So yeah, I mean, in the growth economy, I think we there was a lot of warts that were hidden. We could get away with a lot of stuff and volume too, right? Like we could blast out 1 million emails and get a few responses and not really respect our prospects in that regard, like not really care about them on the other end. Like whatever, you're a number, I can hit it, go, and I got endless leads, I got all sorts of stuff. Now it's a time to kind of recenter, and Morgan is, he's on my team. And him and I, he's a millennial, and we always have these conversations. And he said, you know what, John, my generation has grown up in a point and click world, right? Where anything we want, we can get. If I want to catch up on a series, I don't have to wait for next week. I can just binge watch it on Netflix. The newest movie that pops out, boom, download it right now. If I want my favorite dinner, Grubhub shows up at my door. If I want to hit my number, I push a button and leads, you know what I mean? And I increase the volume in that flow here. And he's like, we don't really think about the person on the other end of the line. And I think now is a time where it's going to be a reset on quality over quantity in every way. And from a smart standpoint, there's always the balance of quality and quantity. But from a smart standpoint, we have to start re-looking at our ideal customer profile. We have to re-look at the personas of the people that we're going after and figure out where are they, because they've changed. If you qualified somebody back, if you had an ideal customer profile and personas that you were going after in January, they're different right now, because there's certain industries that were great for us and now are terrible for us. There's certain people within organizations that used to be able to make decisions, now they can't. And so we got to increase our business acumen. We got to start giving a shit about the people that we're reaching out to, and showing some respect by figuring out, first of all, resetting and saying, you've heard me say this, where there's 3 types of clients, right? Red, yellow, green. Red, lockdown, like almost going out of business, don't touch them. Yellow, they've settled into this somewhat new norm. They might not be making decisions, but they're maybe have time to evaluate stuff. And then green, they got to go, right? So 2 factors of go, like they're all of a sudden on fire, like they're selling like hotcakes because they went from a like to have to a must have. Yep. Or green like me, which is I got to sell my way through this. So what we have to do is we have to understand where those people are. Where are the greens now in this new world for us, so that we can come after them with a very thoughtful approach about what we can do for them right now. And then the yellows say, okay, let's take a more nurture approach to them. And then the reds, just let them, hopefully they'll be there. So I think that, plus understanding what these people go through on a day-to-day basis. I'm recommending a lot of my clients, like, we guess a lot in sales. we guess about what your priorities are. I assume, based on some basic information here. And everybody's trying to figure out right now, like, okay, what do I say? Like, what's the tone that I take, and how do I be empathetic but still do my job? Well, there's a group that knows that, and it's not us dipshit salespeople. It's our customers.
Yep.
So right now, I think is a time for customer success and sales to get together and go interview some of your customers right now that fit the personas and say, hey, how have your priorities changed? What's happened in your world? What are you being now held accountable for? How's that? And then learning that from the people who are, and then going finding people like that to have those conversations with. So I think it's just a resetting of quality over quantity all day long. I do think that companies need to take a hard look at their SMB and mid-market approach at this point, because the volume play I understand is necessary there, but the cost of sale right there is hard to justify from a sales rep standpoint. So I think a lot of things are shifting in that regard that we can get to as well. But people ask, how do I show empathy? Personalization and relevance. That's how you show empathy. You don't show empathy by saying, hey, I hope you and your family are doing well. Like, that's not empathy. That's fake empathy, right? Empathy is actually putting yourself in that person's shoes and understanding their situation. And we got to figure out how to learn that so that we can have better messaging and connect better with other people. So
it's really, it's about being genuine right now, don't you think? It's you had a podcast recently that had, I'm sorry, I forget his name, from Vidyard. Videos, and it struck me that that video perhaps is a great way to use in your outbound approaches to get that personalization and that experience of body language. Is that something you're considering?
Well, it's our highest response rate right now, by far.
It is.
Like, LinkedIn video is hands down our highest conversion ratio, period. Because the way that people communicate, and this is Dr. Albert Munchin Dirt or something communication model, 8:35:57. 8% of the way that we read emotion and communicate is words, 35% is the tonality and how we use those words, and 57% is body language. So phone, I'm sorry, email is 8, phone is 43, face-to-face is 57.
Right.
So how do you want to show empathy? Show it.
Show
empathy.
Awesome.
Right.
Yep. Thanks. Hey, Becc, as head of sales at Chorus, what adjustments have you had your team make over the last few months that continue to be successful? Because I know you've had 7 times X, you've done a great jobs with your team. So what have you done? Things changed?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Things have definitely changed for us. I have 5 things, real ways that I changed, the program from the bottom up, but I won't bore you with all 5. Why don't I can I agree to give you 3?
Sure. By the way, you didn't bore me yesterday. For an hour we talked.
I think it's interesting that, John brought up empathy, and I did a lot of reading on empathy about a year ago. And a guy called Paul Bloom, he wrote a book called Against Empathy, and there's 2 kinds of empathy that he goes into. There's cognitive empathy, which is I can understand your situation, and then there's emotional empathy, where you are physically entering into like that emotional reality with someone. And he talks about the damaging effects of entering into that emotional state with someone, because you can make decisions, based on that one situation that are against the greater good. And so when I'm thinking about our prospects, it's like when John mentions like, hey, hope that your family, and your kids are doing well, it's because it comes off as ingenuine, because you're saying like, hey, like I really feel your pain and X, Y, and Z. So what I'm really focused on is how do my reps stay in that cognitive empathy range of understanding my prospect situation in terms of what they're doing in their day-to-day, and how can I make that better through my product. So the first thing that I did was I rethought the book of, and I would challenge everyone on the line who's selling today, like think through your prospect's new reality, think through what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then rethink your value prop in terms of how you can incorporate into their new normal. And I'll give you an example. Chorus, I was always talking about like, hey, how can you make your sellers better? You can, highlight the best practices, double down on the great practices, and eliminate the bad. Like that's how we help companies, get better, is like diagnose what top performers are doing and help you emulate it. But I'm like, hey, now our buyer more than ever is selling remotely. you have some rep that was field selling over at Oracle for 20 years, and they have a physical bag with them or whatever. And now they're having to understand, like, how do I sell remotely? How do I, build rapport with someone? How do I like make that same experience real for someone over a Zoom link, which is a completely different skill set. So I have pivoted all of our Chorus messaging and value prop to not how we help sellers better, but how do we help teams remotely sell better? So increased accountability. You can understand what people are doing on the phone. You can coach them remotely. You can keep up collaboration between your team members whenever they're sitting in their, 471 square loft and they haven't seen a soul in a week. So that's the first thing I did is I got really gritty about understanding. I'm like, look, we have a new CEO at Chorus, and I'm like, and he's judging me from, unfortunately, not the last year of what happened and all our progress that we made in the 7X, but he's judging me from his experience and reality is when he started moving on. So I'm like, it's unfortunate, that he came on in a pandemic, but it's a really good challenge to me of like, hey, I need to learn how to produce during a pandemic so that I can, so to speak, like impress him right off the bat. So that's the first thing I did was pivot.
Yeah, can I jump in on that just real quick before you do 2 and 3 is same exact thing. We had our sales training, right? It's skills uptick. That's typically what KPIs and skills uptick, but now exactly that same thing. Our thing, because now so many sales reps are working from home, we actually pivoted our messaging to motivation and engagement.
Totally.
Because now you got a VP of sales who's got 20 sales reps sitting at home, no idea. And look, as an SDR, for instance, one of the things that made an SDR role tolerable with all the beatings that they take, they get 99 no's out of 100, right? What made it tolerable was that they worked in an office and they were sitting around a bunch of other SDRs that were getting their ass kicked. And it was like, oh man, did you hear that? Wow, that was a train wreck. Holy crap, let's grab a drink afterwards. And it made it tolerable. Now these kids are sitting at home by themselves in their office with their dog next to them, with the only one to collaborate with, you know what I mean? And now it's this lonely ass. So now we're leaning into motivation and engagement, which is striking such a better mark. And then the other thing, I want to give everybody a tip here, which is growth economy. You can talk about growth and revenue and all this wonderful stuff. Down economy, you talk about cost savings, efficiencies, but one thing right now that is working for us is agility. And I'm going to give everybody a very tactical thing that you can do right now, which is the #1 open rate that we have and the #1 response rate that we have is when I simply put agility in the subject line. And then I talk about it because look, moving forward, it's not going to get less weird, okay? Like this isn't the last pandemic we're going to face over the next 20 to 20 years. This isn't the last major disruptive thing that's going to happen to the economy. So the competitive advantage, the companies that are going to be agile and able to adjust along the way, they're going to be the ones that win. So not only the companies, but our sales teams and us as sales professionals. So I would recommend everybody think of ways to shift their messaging, as Becc said, to highlight how you can help that company that you're reaching out to become more agile moving forward. Because that is the theme right now that we're seeing, at least this week. Next week it'll probably be different, but this week that's where, and it's all about reassessing and like Becc said, being agile enough to realize that your value proposition has changed. The personas you're going after, as priorities have changed, all that stuff, so that you can adjust and create some messaging that now resonates. Because if you're banking off what you came up with, all your pitch decks and all your like ICP things, and Sally, she's a marketer and she likes that type of crap, you're gonna get smoked. You're not going to succeed. So sorry, Becc, I wanted to jump in before that because that's like
that's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. Jim, should I go into the other two, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I always want to make sure I don't hog too much the mic, but second thing that we've done from the sales cycle perspective that was really helpful, and I'm going to give a shout out to Maya over at Clary. She actually, gave me the idea to do this, but the second tip I have for people is to get the CFO engaged within your deals.
That's interesting. We just had that conversation, Becc.
Your CFO is your new buyer.
Right.
Because we're doing budget cuts and they're doing rollbacks and they're trying to prioritize what, what actually makes it across the line. So if you're only sticking with, for example, our ICP is a VP of sales, and it's like maybe in a different world, they were the sole decision maker and they were the person that they're the, the head honcho, he or her, is the head honcho in terms of, who makes the decision. But now, they're saying, hey, Chorus looks great. That's awesome. Da, da, da.
Yep.
And they go over to the CFO and they're like, hey, I need you to write a check for this. And all of a sudden there's this big, long multi-tier discussion on, do we need this right now, especially during a pandemic? And so, for us over here at Chorus, it's like, and I think everyone in the sales world, it's like it called into question all the deals that you currently have in cycle of, do we actually need this? And the number one buyer that's important, regardless of if you sell into a CFO traditionally or not, now becomes the CFO. So I think getting the CFO engaged, and go ahead, Jim.
I was going to ask you a question. So about the CFO, which I totally agree with you, what is it that you're positioning with the CFO? I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but what would be the positioning?
Yeah, so I think I want to keep it general for people just on the line in general, but for us over here, we're thinking through the CFO and like how it can help them in their day-to-day, like how could it improve sales numbers and how could it improve pipeline and how could it improve X, Y, and Z, help a CFO do their day-to-day better. And it's like, well, when it comes down to it, a CFO is reporting, right? Just like sales ops is, it's reporting, but there's no bigger bummer to be reporting on numbers where we aren't hitting our metrics, right? So it's like we have been taking collateral, we have been putting pitch decks together, we have been putting an active multi-thread strategy together. And even over here at Chorus, we've gone so far as to say, okay, within our CRM, is the CFO engaged? And they have to click yes or no. And over a certain amount of deals, they have to have the CFO engaged, because when we are closing during this pandemic, it's because the rep was multi-threading. They knew there was multiple stakeholders, not only within the traditional disciplines of Chorus, but that the financial buyer is a new bottleneck or advocate within this new
John, you're dying to say something.
Point on that because agreed. Agility is actually the message that is resonating with CFOs with us too. But that said, I don't want people to, unfortunately for like inexperienced reps, the assumption is that CFOs only care about budget. And that is not true. That is absolutely not true. So this is why, going back to business acumen, if you're a sales leader listening to this right now, I implore you, I beg you to call up some of your customers and ask them if they would do just a Friday afternoon lunch and learn with your team, and get them on a call and ask them, what are you looking at right now? In addition to budget, which is obvious, how are you thinking? Have your reps read job descriptions of CFOs in industries to see what they're being held accountable for. Google CFOs, SaaS industries, priorities, challenges, 2020, COVID-19, see what comes up. Because if you just assume that CFOs care about budget and that's what you're going in at, you're going to get, again, that's not going to be an interesting conversation with them unless you can save them a shitload of money for a very similar solution. But that's not a CFO discussion. You know what I mean? So I think it goes back to business acumen, it goes back to caring, and it goes back to having empathy for that role. And so really right now, those are the exact type of things that we need. Here's an example. Here's how I know business acumen is not, most sales reps don't have good business acumen. I've trained thousands of reps, a lot of them who sell technical solutions to technical people, right? So C-level, right? CIOs, right? And I sit in front of I used to sit in front of 30 or 40 sales reps. And it's like, oh yeah, you guys got business acumen, right? Good. Okay, let me ask you, who in here knows the difference between a CTO and a CIO? Crickets. And I'm talking like 20-year vets. Like 20-year vets in sales who have sold technical solutions to technical people can't articulate the difference between a CTO and a CIO. Now, don't get me wrong, in the mid-market level, CTOs and CIOs usually kind of share it's usually the one role. But once you get to the enterprise, there is a distinct difference between a CTO and a CIO. And if you don't even at least understand that, look, I'm not ever going to pretend like I know what a CIO does on a day-to-day basis. I didn't go to school to be a CIO. I don't live the life of a CIO. But I want to know enough to understand, to have contextual questions. So I can say, instead of tell me about your priorities, which is the stupid, lazy sales rep approach, I can say, hey, you know what? We're typically dealing with CIOs in healthcare right now. And with this COVID thing, right, some of the top things that we're hearing from them of what they're focused on are X, Y, and Z. Are those yours? Even if they're not, the fact that
Right.
you show you know their world a little bit tends to open up the conversation way more than it would otherwise.
That's great. Awesome. Becc, number 3.
Yeah, number 3. Number 3 for everyone on the line. I think it's interesting right now. It's like you have to be very careful with your messaging. It's like if you mention COVID, then everyone thinks you're monetizing a pandemic. If you don't mention COVID, they're like, are they tone deaf? Like, do they not know what's going on right now? So I have deployed within our messaging for each email or call that we're making what I call the push-pull technique of we're aiming for balance within the message. So we say like, hey, reason for my outreach is, I saw you wrote this article on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. One quote that stood out to me is X, hooking it to the value prop in the middle, asking for the CTA and sticking the landing, in the third line. And then in the fourth line, we've already pushed for what we want, right? And so we're pulling back in the fourth line and we're saying either way, keep the good content coming, hope that you're safe during this time, and like big fan of your team or whatever, like whatever you want to put in that last line. But from my perspective, you want to give your buyer some reprieve in that last line, like, hey, this is what I want, and it's based on this, and this is why I think it'd be worth, arguably, respectfully, some of your time to jump on a call about this thing. But even if you don't want to take a call with me, it's okay.
Well, and that,
well, even if you don't buy from me, I hope that you're well. So you're not mentioning it at the beginning of your message,
Right.
like, hey, why I'm calling? Because then people are like, are they monetizing COVID?
Right.
But you want to give your buyer some reprieve of like, even if you don't buy from me, even if you can't give me what I want, even if there's nothing in it for me, to speak, like either way, I hope that you're doing well. And I'm a big fan of your team. Even if you don't buy from me, like I keep the good content coming. So I think it gives this kind of flavor to your prospect of like, it's okay if you don't buy and it's okay if it's not the right time. So there's not so much pressure, like your relationship is instigated only on a, whatever, that they're going to jump on a call for you.
And that leads to the call to action piece. So what we're finding right now, I used to be the biggest like proponent of if you want something, ask for it. You know what I mean? Don't be fluffy with your ask. Don't say stuff like let me know or any of that stuff, because if you want, like, ask, hey, what's the best way to get 10 minutes on your calendar? When are you free for a call? Be specific, right?
Agreed.
I've actually backed way off of that. Way off of that. Now we're treating when we're outreach to somebody, right? When we go after them, it again, it's, and Becc knows this better than anybody. It's not about the one email. It's not about the one voicemail. It's about the contact strategy. It's about the story that we tell them. Right. So I'm going to recommend everybody think of what that story sounds like and treat it almost as a conversation. Like Gary Vee has this book called Jab, 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 Right Hook, right? Which is add value, add value, add value, then ask. I will say, I think it's a little weird right now for reps to just be sharing content with me, like as the first touch. I think that's odd. Like I've never heard of, I've never heard of you before, and you're going to send me a 39-page ebook and be like, what the, like, who are you? What? But so you lead with, but you adjust your call to action to a conversation. So what happens is exactly what Becc said there. Hey, do a little bit of personalization. I saw your post. I read this. I wanted to chat with you. Let me know if that's something interesting. Let me know if that's worth a conversation. And then the follow-up from that is, hey, by the way, here's a case study based on what I said earlier. Let me know if, is that something of interest to you? So it's almost you're putting it in their court to come to you as opposed to forcing. Like, because there's 3 kind of calls to action. One is a direct, hey, are you free tomorrow at 3 o'clock, right? I've personally never had success with that. But so I've never used it. Or what I always used to use was the open-ended call to action, which is, hey, when are you free for a call, right? But the thing that everybody right now is so, now more than ever, time is the most precious asset that any of us have. And so when you ask for my time, it's almost like this, like, I don't want to give you my time. But if you ask for a response in a conversational type of thing, you actually might have somebody to be a little bit more open to engaging with you. And so I would encourage a lot of people to think of it as a one-way conversation, but as a conversation, and not always be like, hey, what's the best way to get 15 minutes? What's the best way to get 15 minutes? What's the best way to get 15 minutes? Like warm them up a little bit. You know what I mean? I mean, our most successful cadence right now is, hey, research, whatever. A lot of our clients are having a hard time figuring out that right tone of what to, of prospecting versus empathy and all that other stuff. And we got some cool stuff that we're doing right now remotely with on-site training or with online training that we're using to address that. Let me know if that's something let me know if your team's having a similar challenge. Then after that, I sent them a case study of something that I did with a client like literally 2 weeks ago. It wasn't a case, it's a testimonial that said, whoa, that remote training was even better than on-site, and it actually got my reps super engaged. So it's a super sweet little testimonial that's relevant to them. So that's where I send it to them, and there's no call to action. Hey, by the way, on that email that I sent, I reply all to it. By the way, here's a case study of a client that we just did some remote training that addresses that need. And then the next one is, hey, what about motivation engagement? Is that something that you're having a challenge with? I'd like to have a conversation with you, but it's never like a hardcore, like, I got to sell to you. And that's where we're seeing the nurture factor get people to eventually say, okay, let's have this conversation.
So that's interesting. I'm not quite sure this is the right segue, but does your concept, Becc, of personalization at scale, is this kind of a segue to what John is saying?
I mean, well, he said a lot. So unclear. What's the question? Not that it was. I just.
Well, first of all, I think we talked about quality versus quantity, and then we were talking about sort of the deposit approach. I think, John, it's creating some deposits. And then I know you and I spoke, and so I'm putting it together in my head, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but the personalization at scale was something that really caught my attention when we were chatting about that, and it sort of sounded like it fit together here.
Yeah,
how you use your outreach or your sales enablement platform.
Yeah, so
Sales loft outreach.
Yeah, I mean, it can be two different approaches. I mean, to your question, it's like even with the deposit approach, let's just blanket it as a deposit approach of like, hey, I'm going to reach out. Kind of like John mentioned, it's like, why is this person sending me all this content? It's like, like I know what you want. I respect you more if you just ask for it. Right up front, like be good about it. But if I'm going to go the deposit approach or I'm going to ask for a hard CTA at the end, either way, I want to personalize and I want to prove research. So it's like, I've seen a lot of people, it's like, why can't I just use a content marketer if I'm going to go the deposit approach if I'm not going to personalize, right? Like, why can't I use Marketo and just blast the crud out of some messages that, where I don't know this person? So, there are some ICPs where people have said, like, should you personalize in every regard? It's like, look, okay, I've worked with now, 4 hypergrowth pre-IPO companies, 3 of them, 2 are within MarTech, 2 within SalesTech. And all of them, I'm like, look, define the line of where you want to sell into, arguably mid-market, a lot of companies would salivate over, and our ICP is a manager level and above, and then decide, a lot of people are like, well, how do I scale it? And I'm like, well, scale what? What are you trying to scale? You're trying to scale results, yes? Okay, so if person A sends out 8,000 messages and gets 10 positive responses, and person B sends out 80 messages and gets 12 positive responses, who's the better rep? It's like B. So we should be after, what is the state of inflection point that really doesn't overcook the goose, doesn't overcook the goose where my reps are researching too much and they're not actually making it relevant. So they're just proving personalization, but it doesn't actually hook my buyer. And like, how can I get that out at scale both? So, my approach is centered around, I'm like, hey, look, I'm not, the god of anyone, right? It's like I, out of need and absolute necessity, I asked myself 2 questions. I'm like, do I respond to unpersonalized emails? No. Do I think my buyer is different than me? No, because I'm a peon and I'm talking to VPs. So I think they have less time. So I'm like, okay, how can I, so I went to Trish Bertuzzi and I'm like, hey, what's the average activity metric? She's like 52 dials per day. I'm like, cool. That is, the Golden Brick Road and Dorothy is 52 dials per day. So I got to find a way, leveraging sales engagement, to get the, like, number one, get a prototype to personalization, because people would say, like, how do I maintain consistency among my reps? And if I have a 23-year-old, like, you know, who's coming right in and doesn't know like industry acumen or doesn't know the ecosystem well, like, how do I maintain consistency? So I'm like, okay, number one, I need to put a structure to it. You know, not only a structure to what the email looks like, but a structure to how they're even picking out a personalized premise. And then number two, once I have that, so that was my first step. You know, whenever I was at my first company that I did at was Gong, I'm like, okay, how do I put a structure to it? And I cut them back from 100 dials and 50 emails all the way back to 10 emails and 20 dials, and I 4x their numbers in 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, here's the prototype, but no one's going to give a shit, to be frank, unless I get it back up to 52 dials, because there's a bunch of C-level who just want to pull the gas metric. So I called, when I went to G2, I called up Outreach and I'm like, hey, I needed one license and I need an entire CS team to figure out how in the hell am I going to scale this thing to get this to 25 emails and 52 dials. Otherwise the industry is going to tell me like, hey, this is great, kid. And yeah, we totally believe in you, but it's too subjective. It's too qualitative. It's too something. And so called them, worked it into their system as a default view. And then when I came over to Chorus, I actually 7x them in a month. So I'm like, you know, I think it's a really apropos time for people to know their buyer. Like now more than ever, you should know your buyer. But I honestly, I would argue beforehand, I'm like, personally, you shouldn't, you know, now that the pandemic happens, it's not like, oh, now I should know my buyer. Now I should know what matters to them. Now I should talk to them with relevance. It's like, I would argue I should have known all that shit beforehand. And like now, yes, like I'll take it where I can get it. You know, but I'm like, I'm happy to see the community for whatever reason. Again, like I'm not going to be a punk here. Like whatever reason caused us to care about our end buyer and use their minutes. You're talking to an SVP at Oracle. This is someone who's been in their career for like whatever, 15, 20 years, and they have earned my respect of knowing who they are. So it's like, you got 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. That's all you got. Make it count. Like say the right things about them and hook it quickly to what you do and how you can make their day better. And it's like the responses, the incredible thing, and I'll say this and then I'll be quiet for a while, but the incredible thing is the responses that we get are just, they're overwhelmed, like they're ready to validate you and say good job. It's just the bar has been so low that they have no opportunity. So the responses we get from these VPs is like, oh, that is the best outreach, you know, I've heard in my career. And I'm like, oh, I actually could use a little bit of work. But I'm like, their response is just so overwhelmingly benevolent that I'm like, it makes me want to, you know, keep doing this so that all of these VPs, they believe in SDRs again. They believe in cold outreach again, because they're like, this person doesn't view me as a number. So I cannot view them back as a number, and I can give them some of my time because they gave me some of theirs.
That's great. And I don't want you to be quiet, so keep, you know, you can keep talking, both of you. I've got so many questions. I could be here for 2 hours, by the way. Go ahead, John.
I do want to throw something out there, because I mean, I've been a proponent of personalization for my entire career, right? I mean, I built the majority of my business with personalization. I've come to realization though recently that, not really, like in a couple of years back, that personalization means nothing without relevance. Right. So I want to make sure that people are crystal clear on this. I used to have a heart attack because there was a lot of you know, a few years back there was a few like AI tools that came out. And these AI tools were doing this personalization, and a few of them I saw and I was like, holy shit, like we are screwed. Like,
I did it.
Right?
Nova did it.
Yeah, Nova.ai and that type of stuff, right?
Comments, and you're like, who gives a shit?
Right. And so, well, that's the point, right? So at first I saw a few of them and I was like, oh my God, this is one of the most personalized things, and they wrote it in 30 seconds, right? Where does that leave us? But then I started realizing what these tools were doing is what they were going out and crawling and grabbing some level of personalization, and it turned it into prospecting circa 2001, which is like when LinkedIn first started, right? And so, like, look, when LinkedIn first really started going, and you connected with me and you say, hey, John, I see you went to University of Maryland, like that's great, like that actually worked early days of LinkedIn, right? Because I was like, holy shit, like I didn't get a templated email, there's actually a person who paid attention to me, like that's kind of cool, right? and so now the AI is doing that. Now the AI is like, I'm getting emails that say, hey, John, I see you're in Boston. Have you gone to Legal Seafood recently? And then it hard pitches to this, like hard cut to this, like it's the same thing with the bullshit empathy. Hey, I hope you and your family are doing well. We got this great thing that you can buy, right? And there's no connection between the personalization and the relevance. I actually, if I were to choose, I'd rather have relevance over personalization. I really would. And so, because I have responded to emails that were not personalized, but hit me at the right time, had the right message, right? And so it was like, ooh. So a cheat code, and this is how people can think about this, is look, if it was up to me, I'd have a half an hour to do research on every single account that I was going after. That's just not reality. Okay, it's just not reality. We have to hit those 50 dials. We have to hit the metrics. I do think we're in this weird transition phase though, where Gen Xers like me, we grew up in a volume world. We grew up in a volume world, 100 dials, that type of thing. And I still remember my elevator pitch from Thrive Networks 20 years ago when I could say it in my sleep right now. And it was a pure numbers game. And so now I think everybody understands that quality is the answer. But guess what's hard to coach to? It's hard to coach to quality. It's hard to sit down, even with a great tool like Chorus. I have to sit down for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, listen to that call, give my feedback, do that stuff. So that's, as a manager and I even maybe a player coach manager, you got a better shot at seeing God than me doing that. All right. But you know what's easy to coach to? How many dials did you make today? How many, right? How many meetings? So it's the lazy manager way to say make 50 dials. So the transition, even though everybody understands it, they're still stuck in this world of numbers because that's the easiest thing to point to. So the middle ground here is relevance. So here's a thing that everybody can do. Segment down into personas in industries, VP of sales in SaaS, CIOs in manufacturing. Go do some research about what these people care about today. And I mean today, in COVID-19 world, in this up world that we're all in right now, right? Go interview some customers, extract what are the 3 to 4 top priorities, 5 or 6 top priorities and challenges that those people are facing today in that industry. Come up with a message for each one of them. So 5 or 6 different messages, and even also a question, because this is what you can scale. I kind of go back to old school Glengarry Glen Ross with AIDA, right? Attention, interest, desire, action. As ridiculous as that movie was, as far as like what the perception of sales, I hate it as a sales movie. I really like those 8 minutes though. And that's the 4 mental stages we all need to go through before we buy something. First, something needs to get our attention, then we have to be interested, then we have to have a desire, then we have to move to act. If we think of emails, the subject line gets my attention. The first sentence tells me whether or not I'm interested, okay? And now, if you look at your phone, I can see the subject line, I can see your name, the subject line, and the first 10 words of, right? If that doesn't get me interested, I'm not opening up the email. And guess what? What am I interested in? Me. I'm not interested in you. I don't care about you. So starting your emails off with, I'd like to introduce myself to you. Shut up. Or recent surveys say, I don't give a shit. We're the leading provider of. No, you're not. So you got to start with me. So we can do that personalized. And my version of personalization at scale is 20% personalization, that first line, but it has to be connected. So you can actually create messaging around those triggers, open up a new office, launch a new product. You can create messaging around your value there and then put just a little bit on top that says, hey, I saw you merged with XYZ company. That, right? That's personalization at scale in my opinion. But what you can scale at scale are questions. If you come up with a question that is relevant to the persona that you're going after, and you can say, Jim, are you having a challenge right now with your sales reps being motivated and engaged as they work from home? I can send that out to 50 VPs of sales, CEOs. Well, the reason I ask, right, is because we're working with sales teams from a remote training standpoint, and we're helping them keep going. I was wondering if that'd be worth a conversation. I can send that out to 50 VPs of sales and don't even have to think about it. But it's got to be targeted and relevant. Now, if you can combine the two and say personalization and relevance all day long, but if you get me to choose, go relevance over personalization. And to Beck's point, yes, is that something that I could automate through Marketo? Absolutely, 100%. And that is the discussion we should have about the value of SDRs and where they're going in this world of where we're headed to, because that is my biggest concern.
Yeah. So I would, Jim, if you don't mind, I wanted to turn this into a really good panel for everyone on the line.
Go right ahead.
That was my question is, I mean, speaking again, all I am is a practitioner. For some reason that got handed the mic, you know, maybe I'm too mouthy or whatever. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I had been doing that. That was my first out of the two. If I'm going to choose personalization or relevance all day long. You know, I'm like, that's the ROI. But like, I've been asked the question before, could AI replace SDR? And I'm like, how you're doing it, yes. Sorry,
Absolutely.
I know how to do it. I'm like, I could go to market, I could write up, okay, you know, if buyer persona equals X, this is my messaging. I could, if industry X, this is my messaging. And I could even send it out through Marketo where it looks like it's in my name and it's not really me sending it. And I could replace what most SDRs are doing currently with automation. I'm like, that being said, so I'm like, you know, hell, let's do it. And then let's use our existing headcount for the personalization and relevance hook. So like the problem that I had with tools that they said would claim to me like, hey, I can help you personalize. I'm like, but you would never know my unique value prop. So you wouldn't know what to pull to personalize on other than, hey, I noticed that you went to the University of Maryland, go Ducks or whatever. And it's like, okay, relevant. I'm like, hey, hell, let's run the playbook on the buyer persona, you know, et cetera, like on the side here. And then let me use my existing and create it almost as a pseudo inbound engine and use my existing reps headcount to do what no bot can do. And so I'm like, you personalization. I'm not talking technographic of like tech stack they're using or firmographic based on industry or even demographic based on role and buyer persona. I'm talking about psychographic personalization. Jim, you said this thing. What if you could X, Y, and Z faster, you know, with blank, 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 without blank? Give me a shot to unpack that either way. And it's like, that's where I'm seeing that messaging because I'm like, or that's where I'm seeing that hook because as a rep, as an SDR, I was sending out the relevant ones. I'm like, I've been trained with everything. Spin, Sandler for several years, Challenger on. So I'm like, I'm cranking out some like pretty thrilling templates. And I'm like, and I'm getting okay results, but I'm like, there has to be another way to really get my buyer engaged and make them want to be engaged. Because I'm like, at the end of the day, like you go to London and you see like the guard there and they're standing there with no reaction. Everyone's trying to like spook them and get them to react. It's like, that's what people are trying to do with prospecting of like, they want to be a special snowflake. Our prospects want to be a special snowflake. So I'm like, hell, let them, you know, like, let's pick out this one thing, let's hook it to relevance. And maybe, you know, maybe we run that relevance only playbook in the background and it's like, and we double our engine here. But I'm like, I simply wanted to insert personalization as like, I'm like, this thing has never been done. Psychographic to the individual personalization had never been done. So I'm like, here's a tool, you know, and I'm like, I'm not saying use this hammer in every case scenario. And I got a lot of kickback of people being like, who the hell does she think she is? Like, does she say personalize it, you know, at all costs and without relevance? I'm like, whoa. Put your daggers down. I'm like, I wanted to put this as a tool for reps to use out of necessity. And for some reason got kicked to megaphone. And I'm like, okay, so here's how you do it. But I agree with you. It's like, John, if I'm going to do one out of the other, I'm not going to talk about the, you know, whatever, Boston Commons without any kind of hook. I'm going to talk about the hook without Boston Commons. You know, if I have the opportunity with, you know, with most of the teams, I was given that luxury of like, hey, you know, prove it out. The first org that I did it at, I was like, give me a month. Don't ask me one freaking question. And if I don't double your numbers, then fire me. Okay. Yep. And I'm like, I have a certain amount of conviction here that this is going to work. So I'm like, for most reps out there, you know, you're going to be selling into a non-traditional ICP, like outside of sales, outside of marketing. It's like the keys to the kingdom. I'm like, if I want to get known for anything, it's execution. So it's like, use those tools within context. But I'm like, I would never do something that I don't need that I don't need to be doing that I could use a robot for. So it's like, I would almost like say, like, in some cases, do both approaches. Like if like it's a B2C model, it's SMB, and like you simply have to like, you know, whatever, brand awareness. I'm a startup and nobody even knows me. It's like, go relevance, go kick out, you know, a bazillion templates through Marketo and like call it a day. But for like these really high niche buyers, I'm like, I cannot imagine an SVP over Oracle or someone who is just acquired reading a mass blast template, regardless of how good the buyer hook was. First of all, opening it. Second of all, reading it. And then in case you just hit the magic button of like, you hit the right time, like John said, you know, I sure as hell wouldn't respond to it. So it's like, you know, I would encourage people to like use both tools, you know.
Yep.
Always be like, if you're going to be personalized, you have to be relevant. But if you're going to be relevant, you don't always have to be personalized, and like deploy both to like bring those fish in, hit the goal, you know, whatever, like, you know, do the whole thing. But I think both are so important, you know, COVID or non-COVID economy.
An easy way to segment this is just tier out your accounts. Let's go back to the ICP that we talked about, right? You tier out your accounts. Your tier ones, too many sales reps take their list of 1,000 accounts. They start at one and they start mowing through it, and they don't take any real thought into what makes a real good customer for us, and even inside the account. So what we do is I recommend everybody have a top 25. Have a list of top 25 accounts. Those are the ones you personalize to. Those are the ones you tell a story to. But your tier twos, run a list of VPs of sales, SaaS industry, under 25 million that use Salesforce. Come up with 5 or 6 different messages and questions and put a couple of pieces of content in there and let it ride. And if you want to, here's also a middle ground of what Morgan does a really good job of. What he'll do is he'll actually send out a targeted cadence. So a persona driven cadence, okay? But then he'll wait to see when the engagement happens. So it's like the first email, do they open it? The second email, he puts a link in it. Do they engage with that link? And then after, like once they engage with the content, then the ones that engage drop down to a section where he personalizes it. Whereas the people that don't engage, they stay on the automated, right? So it's.
That brings me to though that, you know, you mentioned about engage and being able to see it. I'm assuming you're using a sales enablement platform for that.
Yeah, we use SalesLoft, yeah.
And I think you're an outreach user.
Yeah, I'm using outreach, and we don't, I mean, we do the play of if they open, then there's an immediate trigger with outreach that you can talk to them, but I'm more scenario based. So like even within personalization, you have to talk about sequences and cadences and like shell sequences. So I have about 15 different sequences based on scenarios that they're adding personalization into. So I have content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees. I even do executive churn at scale, IPO, company funding, G2 buyer intent, Bombora, trust radius, website views, like etc. So I have all these sequences and scenarios set up, and what it will dynamic tag is like, you know, hi John, notice that you downloaded our content on whatever 21 cold calling best tips, but more importantly, and then it's blank for the rest of the template, so the rep can say, more importantly, I don't want to talk about you downloading my content. I want to talk about this thing that you did on LinkedIn. And like, that is what is like our positive response rate at this point is 22%, you know, 22% for the volume. And so it's
That's
like,
high.
I always encourage like leveraging some kind of sales engagement panoramas, you know, like there's a lot of them out there. SalesLoft is a great option. Zant, Yesware, Groove, you know, outreach obviously is who we use. But I think it's just about enabling the rep to have the kind of conversation that is going to make someone, you know, buy and make your prospect feel good and valued on the other end of the line.
We've worked with, I know we're bumping up against time. I think we want to open up Q&A because we've got two, experts that I think people are probably dying to ask questions. By the way, we work with both of those platforms, so I'm very well aware of them. Cadences versus sequences. They use a little different naming structure, but a lot of the same stuff.
Plays, there's so many words on there.
I know. Sarah, we're right. We're at that time where we want to open up for questions.
Yeah, a couple have come in. So,
okay. By the way, I have a million more questions for both of you, but I don't want to.
Yeah, and I know we only have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say I have a hard stop here. So what fire away some of those questions.
So the first one is around actually in-person meetings, which is something that's difficult right now. But outside of COVID, do you have any thoughts, either one of you, on when it makes sense to have in-person meetings or to ask for in-person meetings?
I got to be honest, I'd be shocked if in-person meetings come back in the next year. So I got to be honest, I don't know if it's even worth talking about.
Yeah, and I would always be you never know where that person's at that you're talking to, and if you shoot for the in-person meeting, they might be like, oh, that's great, and they might be like, oh, this person's insensitive, and you never know what's going on.
And
So
I'll give you
I don't.
like, people are getting used to this, and I will tell you right now, as an executive, so I'm going to put myself on the buyer side.
Yep.
Anybody ask for an in-person meeting? I mean, unless you were selling major enterprise stuff that it needs a strategy session for us to get together, and that's a different story. I understand that. But if you're looking for a sales call from me, I'm actually annoyed at you, because you know what? There's actually a book called Death by Meetings. Nobody likes meetings. Right? Most meetings are a drastic waste of time. They spend the first 10 to 15 minutes doing bullshit rapport building stuff. The rep asks a bunch of crappy ass questions, gives a pitch deck and says, great, I'll send you a proposal, and they suck. So I'm actually annoyed. I've taken, and by the way, I used to be the person that did that. I would go drive around face to face and meet with you for an hour and do that whole thing. When I shifted to remote selling and started doing this, my meetings were 30 minutes and I'm usually done in 20. Now I sell something where my ACV is about $30,000 and it's 1 to 2, 2 to 3 calls and 2 to 3 people involved. So take that into consideration. But if you can't figure this out, you're going to die a painful death over the next year. Because look, training, same thing with training. The reason I didn't do remote training in the past is because people were used to on site. That's what they liked. And that's what the status quo was. So if I was going up against a competitor and I was offering, no, I can do this remotely and it's actually better, and somebody else said, no, I can come on site, they're going to go with the on-site person all day long because that's what they're used to. People are all getting used to this. Twitter's permanent work from home policy, PagerDuty, permanent work from home policy. There's company, right? Permanent work from home policy. You got to really start to adapt to this and get that on-site stuff out of your way and figure out how to actually work this.
Seismic shifts right now. I mean, telemedicine, all of that, right? I mean, huge. I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have a couple more questions? Do you have time for a couple more questions?
One more question in me. Yeah.
The next question is just, and I think this is a quick answer. I mean, I feel strongly, are the terms unprecedented, uncertain times, and emails getting tiresome to prospects? And maybe even new normal.
Every time we hear that?
And maybe new normal's becoming one of those on that list, right?
Do anything. Yeah, change your vocabulary. Here's small things. Don't say I hope you're doing well. Say I hope you're staying sane. Doing well. You don't know whether I'm doing well or not. I have some friends that are in the hospital. I got some weird shit going on in my life right now. Don't ask me if I'm doing well. Say, hey, John, are you staying sane right now? That's a little bit of a shift. Don't say unprecedented times or COVID-19. Say, you know what I mean? Just shift that up. So just by you asking that question, you already know the answer to that question, by the way. Whoever asked that question, they already know it because they're already seeing it too much.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost.
So I know we're there. Becc, did you want to take a shot at one of these questions before we go?
No, I mean, one last thing before we sign off. With the recent events over the past week or two, I just want to bring this up, for 2 seconds, then we can let everyone go. Be careful of virtue signaling in these times where we're talking, and we don't actually mean it. We're not actually doing anything about it. I think that that's the quickest way to make someone angry who wants an actual result. And so, when it comes to, COVID messaging, or that comes to, everything that's going on right now, or that comes to, just normal everyday prospecting, it's like, just, instead of talking about personalize and know who your buyer is, instead of talking about, them doing well or empathy, it's like enter into their experience and understand how you quickly can make a difference. But I don't think it's a magic terms of like, oh, use these magic words and all of a sudden everyone will respond and want to buy your product, so, during COVID, be cognizant, be self-aware, don't sell into industries that are events right now. It's like, I think everyone on the line is probably really smart. So, use your head and be bold and dream up what your buyer is going through and how you can be of help. Who is it that said, be brilliant, be brief, and be gone, so I think take that into outreach.
That's excellent. John, how do they get a hold of you if they want you for sales training? You got a remote sessions you've created now online, I think, too.
Yep. jbarrows.com. We got a new website, a whole new on-demand platform. So if you go to training for individuals, you'll see it. It's going out there for $420. You get everything that I own for $420 a year because I like that number.
I do too.
Yep. And weed's legal here in Massachusetts, so suck it if you're going to judge
That's right.
me on that.
Yeah.
And
Judge us both.
Instagram is actually the best way. If you want free consulting, free training, John M. Barrows, with an M as in Michael. John M. Barrows, that's my handle on Instagram. That's where I'm doing most of my free consulting and coaching right now.
Becc, how do they get a hold of you?
Call me.
Call you. Okay. And you're at Chorus.
Call 1-800-BECC. Just kidding. If you go to Becc Holland on LinkedIn, you can find me there. And then I do, like Jim mentioned, I do a free ungated, unmonetized series called Flip the Script on YouTube. So if you just flip it, sounds so narcissistic. I'm really sorry to all the people left on the line. If you Google Becc Holland Flip the Script, then it should pop up with this. And I have about 25 videos there.
All right, so I am so grateful to have both of you. You're both stars in my mind. We all follow you. I encourage everybody that's listening to us, follow these folks. They have insights that my team uses all the time. They're keeping us on the edge. I thank you so very, very much from BrainSell and the whole team here. I wish you well. Have a wonderful day. Stay sane. See you at 420. See you at 420.
Exactly. I'll be there.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.